Did you know that you can sell Mickey Mouse merchandise right now? You don't have to pay for the rights, and the Walt Disney Company won't come after you. That's right, you basically own Mickey Mouse. And Minnie Mouse too. So, what do you want to do with them? Make t-shirts with the two of them punching a politician in the stomach? Draw a comic book about their adventures racing cosmonauts to the moon? Animate a movie about their epic romance? Whatever you want, you can do it. Well, okay, you can't do whatever you want. There are some rules. But you can do all those things, as long as you do it with the original version of Mickey Mouse. We're talking about the Mickey Mouse that appeared for the first time in the 1928 cartoon Steamboat Willie. That's the version that now belongs to the public domain. It happened on January 1st of 2024, and you wouldn't be the first person to make Mickey Mouse merch outside of Disney. The Mousetrap is a 2024 horror movie about a crazed man in a Mickey Mouse mask murdering a series of people in an arcade. It was not well received, but it has the unique honor of being the first non-Disney movie starring Mickey Mouse. And there's another one called Screamboat on the way. It's about passengers on a New York ferry boat being hunted by a killer Mickey Mouse, and Mickey will be played by the same actor who plays the iconic Art the Clown from the Terrifier movies. Now, this is all possible because of the public domain, and it has happened with many other very famous characters. So what exactly is the public domain? This is important and fascinating to know because eventually every story will end up there. Here's how it works. Anytime an artist makes something creative, it is considered their intellectual property. They own the rights to that idea, and things like copyrights and patents and trademarks are used to protect it from being taken without being paid for. But it doesn't last forever. Different countries have different copyright expirations. In the US, all stories before 1929 are already in the public domain, and everything after that expires 95 years after its creation. Now, the main reason for that is simple. Creative works shouldn't remain copyrighted for long periods of time after the death of the creator, because it allows other people or companies to profit off their work without them being rewarded for it. So, what does it mean when a character or story is in the public domain? It means you get a lot of versions of that story. Think about it. How many versions of Shakespeare's plays have you seen on stage or in the movies? How many versions of classic novels like Little Women or Pride and Prejudice? Guess who the most portrayed character in all of film history is? It's Sherlock Holmes, the world's greatest detective. Long before Robert Downey Jr. played him, other actors played that role over 100 times. And that's only because it was free to use the character and they didn't need to secure rights and permissions because of the public domain. The same goes for history's most famous monster, Dracula. Appearing in over 80 movies, it's one of the most adapted stories of all time. And Hollywood loves public domain stories because they allow you to make familiar and popular stories with recognizable characters that don't cost them anything to use. If a movie studio wants to put out a movie based on a new novel, then there's a lot of work and money involved. They have to secure the rights from the author and their representatives, which can cost a lot of money and come with other rules. For example, J.K. Rowling had a lot of creative control over the script and directors of the Harry Potter movies. That can be complicated to deal with for big budget movies. But you know who never complains no matter how much you change his stories? William Shakespeare. For movie studios, it's the best of both worlds. Get the popular characters and stories without any of the responsibility of pleasing the person who created them. Even Disney has used public domain stories themselves. Over 20 of the most popular and successful animated Disney movies, from Snow White to Robin Hood to Beauty and the Beast, are based on classic public domain stories. And here's something that'll blow your mind. Even when Disney uses a public domain story, they still try to use the law to stop other people from making their own versions of those stories. Frozen was a huge hit film released in 2013 and loosely based on the public domain fairy tale story The Snow Queen by Hans Christian Andersen. And even though they were using someone else's story, they decided to sue another company's movie called Frozen Land. A movie company called Phase 4 Films had an animated, winter-based film called The Legend of Cirilla, and they changed the name to Frozen Land, but Disney sued to make them change the name back. It's understandable that Disney wouldn't want another company to profit off their movie, But if there's one thing filmmakers are always going to do, it's to try and make a buck off a free story that everyone knows about. Mickey Mouse might be the most popular cartoon animal to get the public domain horror movie treatment, but he's definitely not the first. In 2022, everyone's favorite honey-obsessed teddy bear, Winnie the Pooh, entered the public domain. It was 1 year later, in January of 2023, that Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey was released. The movie tells the story of Christopher Robin returning to the 100-acre wood as an adult to find Pooh Bear and Piglet, now crazed murderers on a killing spree. The movie is not expensive or particularly well made, and you probably won't be surprised to find out that it wasn't well received by critics. But what might surprise you to find out is that the movie did get a sequel that came out very quickly, appearing just over a year after the release of the first one. And more than that, the creators of the two movies announced that these Winnie the Pooh movies are just the beginning of a larger cinematic horror universe based on beloved kids' stories. They've dubbed it the Twisted Childhood Universe, and some of the other classic stories turned horror movie icons have already been announced or the trailers have premiered. First up is Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare, releasing in 2025 and based on the stories of James M. Barrie. After that comes Bambi: The Reckoning, a horror retelling of the classic story of an orphaned deer. The story was made popular by the Disney film, but this is a horror version of the original book by Felix Salten. Coming soon after Bambi is Pinocchio Unstrung. Another character made popular by Disney, this adaptation will make Pinocchio a killer marionette based on the classic novel by Carlo Collodi. And then, after all those films come out, there's only one thing left to do with all of them: bring them together like the Avengers in a movie team-up. And that's exactly what they're planning to do with Pooniverse: Monsters Assemble, which brings together all the monsters from the previous films and a few new public domain characters as well. If you think you're seeing a pattern here, you are. Every one of these characters was a hugely popular Disney character. But don't worry, the children's story turned horror icon phenomenon is about to branch out past famous Disney stories too. January 1st, 2025 marked the day that Popeye the Sailor Man entered the public domain. He first appeared in a comic strip called Thimble Theater in 1929, and he has been a beloved character for decades, but never a Disney movie. And now, he's going to be a horror movie slasher too, thanks to Popeye the Slayer Man. Yes, you heard that right. The movie follows a group of young friends who sneak into an abandoned spinach factory, only to find themselves the victims of a vengeful, squinty-eyed sailor with a taste for vengeance. So, what did we learn from this dive into the weird corners of the public domain? Well, that we will definitely get at least 5 more Sherlock Holmes movies in the next 2 decades? That Dracula and Cinderella will keep showing up over and over? That every beloved children's story will be turned into a horror monster the second that the story reaches the public domain? Yes, probably. But we also learned something else important. That once the original creator of a work of art is long dead and no longer able to benefit from the profits of their creation, the law says that no single company or person should be able to profit from it forever either. Sometimes it gives us bad movies like The Mousetrap or Popeye the Slayer Man, but sometimes it gives us beloved classics like Frozen or Beauty and the Beast. And most importantly of all, it means that future generations of creators have all these amazing stories available to them for inspiration and interpretation without paying a company for the rights to use them. Sometimes the law is complicated and difficult to understand, but sometimes it makes sense and works just right. If you want more fascinating untold stories about the law like this one, be sure to like and subscribe. That's it for this episode of No Way That's Legal. We'll see you next time.